is our last segment with Carl Hutchinson. You have to watch this. This has been a marvelous interview, and today we want to encourage you to watch it and go back to segments 1 and 2 so you can have a comprehensive fit of this lively and meaningful discussion. He is a unique and an awesome individual, and just to hear about his past is something formidable. Also, on his behalf, we want to dedicate this episode to the late Roy Haynes, who was his business partner and mentor. Continue to watch, continue to be blessed. Thank you.
I selected an area of low-cost housing, set up a construction stroke development company, and for the next 6-7 years ran that and built it using 3 credit cards, 3 gold cards. Bearing in mind, I came back to England. My daughter Nadia was in boarding school. My wife wasn't working. I bought a 4-bedroom house opposite a golf course. I got myself 3 gold cards with 10,000 unsecured credit line from each one. So I took 30,000 pounds of credit and built a company. The first year my turnover was 21,000, second year 211,000, third year 1.2 million. Over 7 years, I turned over about, 6 years, I turned over about 12 million. But my problem was, towards the end of that period, we were in the longest recession of the last century in Britain. And what, as they say, more companies go out of business coming out of a recession than going in or during. And basically that's what happened. I got to a stage where I had banks on my back. I had 35 employees who were slowing the projects down because they couldn't see the next project coming afterwards. And I had the clients bearing down on me for delivery of their projects. On top of that, I had a situation where in the construction industry, at the end of a project, there's normally a 5% retention for 6 months, which covers for any defects liability or stuff like that. You have to carry out those works after 6 months before you get your 5%. And I had something like 10 projects finish at the time. So I had over 100,000 pounds stuck in retention monies, which was basically my cash flow.
Yeah.
So, c'est la vie. And another of my old friends, also Caucasian, I phoned him and I said, look, I'm putting the business under. I might need something to do. He gave me 2 numbers. I used one. And had a job. This something I made arrangements for another friend of mine to bill. Again, it was a freelance project, so I got a friend to bill my time and organize my payments through him.
Mm.
Um, 6 months later, the same friend that gave me the numbers said, we have this project in Malaysia. You fancy a trip? So this was by then 1994. So in 1994, a three-man project management team came out to build what was to be an iconic building, the Telecom Malaysia head office in Kuala Lumpur. Now, at that time in Kuala Lumpur, everything was happening. The Petronas Twin Towers was going up, Telecom Malaysia was going up, the new KLI airport was going up. Malaysia was being blitzed with high-rise buildings. So I started off on Telecom Malaysia. I was there for 2 years, and then an opportunity arose on the KLIA project for a interface coordinator to coordinate all the services coming into the main terminal building. So I ended up joining that project. And again, as always, I worked autonomous to everyone else and got the job done. But what happened, this was for a fairly major consultancy practice out of Bristol called Bureau Happold. But in 1998, again, the Asian financial crisis started. And who is it? The company decided to pull out of Malaysia. And our major client was the Japanese Taisei Corporation. And we went to Taisei and we said to them, we have to leave. So they said, why? We said, the company's told us we've got to shut shop and come back home. So we got to go. And they said, do you want to go? And we said, not particularly. They set up a company. So we did. And between my partner and myself, who was the local director, I was the general manager of the company. We set up our company based on cash flow. The Japanese paid us direct, and they used us as a body shopping consultancy. If they needed people to pick up and put down, they would come to us and ask. Basically, that was still when the Japanese had jobs for life policy. So they would employ Japanese specifically, but if they had work overseas, they would do it through, they would employ people through consultancies and agencies. They wouldn't employ foreigners directly. We were in the lucky space that we became a consultant to the Japanese. And for the next 10 years, we worked for the Japanese. We worked in Borneo, the Philippines, Thailand, Taiwan, Qatar, and UAE. So and Vietnam, sorry. And those were the good years. And after that, one thing we realized is that in 2004, their work process started to change because they went out to the Middle East and tried to win projects. And what they were finding, because they were employing that extra level of staff, they weren't winning any projects, because in the Middle East, if you're a major contractor, you do the project from start to finish. They were working on a construction model, which meant construction management model, which meant they had an extra layer of, what do you call it? An extra layer of management on top. So they started to employ their own staff. So that was taking away from our income level. Whilst they wanted to employ myself and my partner at very high rates, sometimes we were earning all up $40,000 a month for each of us. So what we saw was a time when we couldn't have the on-cost, because where we made our money was in supplying the staff, not by being directly employed by them. So we started looking around other areas, and again, through old connections, I had a lead for a project in Dubai, which was supposed to be the next tallest tower in the world, which was to be called, what was it again? The next project was supposed to be the next tallest tower in the world. It was supposed to be taller than Burj Dubai. To give you an idea, this is the building. And next to it is Burj Khalifa, right? It was supposed to be a 2 billion project. And in January 2008, I won a package to provide services, engineering services, to the design team through to completion. My contract value was $36 million. And over the next 6 months, we tagged on a number of other projects, which took us to an order value of $40 million. And then Lehman Brothers happened.
Oh, mercy.
And everything crashed.
In fact, that was around the time we had a recession across the world.
2008.
Yeah. Because I remember you and I talked about that.
Remember the significance of what I said. January 2008.
Yeah.
By December 2008, everything is dissipated. Because in Dubai, everything was the temperature of the construction industry was so hot that if you went in and had to rent or buy a place, renting was the best option. You'd have to pay 2 years rent in advance for an empty apartment. Then you'd have to furnish it. Then you would have to buy vehicles. And looking at a project that was going to last for 6, possibly 7 years, you had to provide all that finance up front. So I rented 2 apartments, furnished them, one for myself and one for my initial staff. I had brought in a staff of about 8 guys, bought vehicles, everything. All of that went out the window. All of that investment went out the window. So that's life. But the good part is I also invested in properties. So we made some money on along the way, and I made some more money on properties. So I'm sitting here just chilling.
That's great. Want to ask you one other thing, then I got a couple other questions, because you had a significant journey. You know, we talk kind of off camera just as cousins. If you remember, I talked to you about the significance of all that you've done. I know you've been in the grind. You have considered it just, I guess, the cost of doing business and just doing you. But what you have done in many ways is unique. So what I want to ask you now is, if I remember the title correctly, you are now the honorary consul to Jamaica in Malaysia.
Yes.
Tell us about that, how that happened.
No, basically, it's in part about giving back. It's a totally voluntary position, and it's about trying to set up bilateral relations between Malaysia and Jamaica. How I came to even think about it was through a friend of mine. He's a Ugandan friend. Throughout my travels, I've picked up friends which have been friends for quite some time, from all over Africa, Caribbean, Europe, Far East, Middle East. And once I make a friend, I never lose them. So basically, where were we? Oh yeah. My Ugandan friend, who was for 2 terms the Commonwealth Press Secretary, suggested to me that why don't you take up the post of honorary consul? But at the time, this was in early 2000s, I think 2002, 2003. There was a honorary consul that was in a Malaysian chairman of a bank here. So that was out of the question at that time. some time later in 2014, 15, the UNHCR representative in Malaysia was a Jamaican lady who I met at an embassy function. And she happened to mention that the Malaysian guy was giving up his position and suggested that maybe I would like to apply. I then went to London on one of my trips and went to see the High Commissioner there, who informed me that the position is handled by Japan. So in 2018, I went to Japan, organized a courtesy visit with the ambassador, Jamaican ambassador, and put myself forward. And this Jamaica works at 2 speeds. I actually got on the slow speed. And 2 years ago, I was officially appointed as the Jamaican honorary consul to Malaysia, looking after bilateral affairs, visas, all the functions that would be done by a high commission or an embassy, but just as a satellite unit to the Jamaican Indian High Commission.
Well, one of the things you kind of bring up by talking about this is there is a larger population of Black and of Caribbean people in that part of the world than we realize. I'll kind of speak to that just a little bit, because I know we have a decent sized population in New Zealand. Don't know what it looks like in Malaysia. Probably have a decent size in Australia, other places.
Well, strange you should ask that question, because that's one of the projects I'm currently working on. Jamaica has an initiative to try and find and identify Jamaicans in the diaspora globally. And in Asia Pacific in particular, we have had discussions as to how to reach out to the various countries and try and track down the Jamaicans living and working or retired in the region. Primarily, you have a lot of professionals that live and work in Asia Pacific, from China, Japan, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, and New Zealand. There's some places have more than others. In Japan, there's about 400 plus. In China, there's a similar number, if not more. New Zealand is about 2,500. Malaysia is fairly small, but so far I've managed to track down about 10. Singapore I'm still working on, but you know, it's a work in progress. But what you tend to find in most of these areas, they're all professionals. working in the region, and a lot of them stay in the regions, or ex-professionals who are now retired, married to local or married to locals.
And they basically anchor where they've been.
Yes.
So now,
But one of the things I found, though, they're all still and will always be Jamaicans, and they all want to help and build Jamaica. One of the things I'm working on is trying to develop a website, and I'm looking for somebody who's willing to build the site for me. I've already purchased all the necessary bits, the domain name and everything, but I'm looking for somebody, hint, hint, to help me to design and build it. I'm too old to learn new tricks.
I'm just at the border of being old. Not quite there, but that's something that definitely needs to happen and is up for discussion. As we get ready to close this out, you have had a unique journey and you have had a purposeful journey, and you purposed that your life could not be this narrow. You couldn't be a bus driver, you couldn't be a sanitation worker, but you saw your life as this wide, and actually your life has been that wide. So now, what would you say to somebody that's watching this? Because there are going to be people watching this all over the world. There are going to be people, young people that are watching this, and people have a tendency to tell you to stay this wide. What would you say to them are some of the tools that they need to access in order to live out to their largest potential?
I would go back and start from my schooling experience.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, one takeaway I had from that was very simple. No child of mine would go through the government education system.
Mm.
And as you know, my daughter has never been through that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I made sure is that I could always afford to send my daughter to the school. So I always made sure that I would send my daughter to the best school I could afford.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I've always drummed into her that none of my grandchildren should ever go to a government-funded school.
Mm.
Always go to a private school. And so far, we've managed to achieve that.
Mm.
And that's the first step. The second step is, in terms of prejudices, unless you're physically assailed, the adage, sticks and stones will never hurt you. So let these insults and innuendos and whatever just fly over your head. Just let them go. Don't fixate on them.
Mm-hmm.
And learn the subtleties of striking back without the people around you seeing, or the offendee seeing what's coming. It's an art, and it's something you have to learn and develop.
Mm-hmm.
It's you know, and it happens at all stages in life.
Mm.
People look at your color and they don't realize what's behind that color.
Mm-hmm.
And as I get older, I get more grumpy and I get more short-tempered. But please hold your temper,
Mm-hmm.
right?
We must be related, but keep going. Mm-hmm.
You know, there's always another day. You always live to fight another day.
Great.
Right?
Well, this has been an inspirational story. I hope you who are watching have been blessed by it. And the bottom line of this story is you don't have to live in a box. You don't have to limit yourself. You can point to the sky, or let's say it this way, point to the moon. And if you fall short, you at least have exceeded what you had planned to do. Don't limit yourself, but look beyond your narrow borders and really live life to the fullest. And we have an example of that right here and right now. And look, I didn't have to go far to find him because after all, he is my cousin. So cousin, thank you so much for this time that we shared in this way.
Thank you very much. And basically, what I would say to anyone watching, if there's any takeaway to learn from this, is set your goals and your purpose and never stop until you achieve them. There will be lots of obstacles in the way, and obstacles will be put there just because of this.
I know you enjoyed this interview, and I hope that it has encouraged you to persevere and push forward. And in the meantime, subscribe, share, and we thank you for your support. Look forward to the next edition of Conversation with Hutch, where the stories you haven't heard become the stories that get told. Thank you.